just wanted to say that the physical release of my webcomic Unfamiliar is up for pre-order right now. Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today's video is about brushes. Digital brushes specifically. There are a lot of brush packs out there, some of them are free, some of them cost money, but I had never actually managed to make some of my own. So today I'm going to learn how to make brushes, make my own brush pack, and then draw a full illustration with only the brushes that I made to see if it turned out any good. And obviously you guys can have that pack for free if you like. But before we get into that, today's video is kindly sponsored by Honkai Impact 3rd. On October 27th, version 6.1 of Honkai Impact 3rd has just released. There's a brand new character, who I am drawing now, themed events, and 3 new outfits. Honkai Impact 3rd tells the story of the Valkyries, fighting against an energy called honkai that erodes the world as they protect humanity. In this exciting new version, the main character is Li Susheng. I'm drawing Li Susheng right now. She's a swordswoman who was born 500 years ago. After being seriously injured, she was cryogenically frozen and only recently woke up. Her design is really intricate. It took me a long time to figure out all the little details and how to draw them. I hope you like seeing her in my weird cartoony art style. There are 3 beautiful outfits released in this new version that you should check out. The Honkai Impact 3rd art collection is also coming. You'll have a chance to obtain it in the new version for free. If you download the game now, you can enter this gift code on the screen and get 30 crystals, 2,888 asterites, and a Hersher trial card for free. Thank you again to Honkai Impact 3rd for supporting the channel. Alright, so I'm going to be going through this process on Clip Studio Paint, but it should be roughly the same for most programs that you use. The first thing I wanted to do was make a brush tip. So for this you just make a little canvas. I did 200 pixels by 200 pixels, and then make the tip that I want. You want to set the color space to black and white. It just makes it so that the white is transparent and the black is like any color that you pick from the wheel. In real life, the tip of your brush or pen or anything will have some texture and stuff on it, so automatically your digital brushes will look a little better if you have a pen tip that is like a little roughed up. It'll just make it look more like a real actual art tool and not, pixels on a screen. So in my first attempt, I kind of blasted through this section, so I'll slow it down for you guys in just a second. But yeah, basically you just have to register this as a material, you check that it's a brush tip, and then you save it with a tag under the brush category. So to go over that one more time, you just go to Edit, Register Material, Image, and then you're going to want to name it here, just specifically the tip. This isn't the brush. You're going to checkbox this, use for brush tip shape. You're going to go into all materials and just save it in your brush folder. And then you probably want to add a tag because there's like 20 billion brushes in Clip Studio, so this will just help you find it. So just like add whatever tag that you want, and then you'll be able to find it later. So once you have your brush tip done, you should get another file open so you can test out your brush, like a bigger file than 200 by 200 pixels. And then you can just open up the little gear for your new brush that you created. You can just make a copy of the basic brush. That's the easiest way to do it, really. And then you can click on the little wrench and you have all of these different things you can change. So this is where it really gets fun, and it's almost kind of like The Sims because you're mostly just playing with different sliders and stuff once you have your brush tip imported in there. So once you have your brush tip in there, all you really have to do is try to figure out what's going to make this brush actually behave the way that you want. So the first thing that I really wanted to mess with was making sure that it had the right response to pen pressure. For me, usually whether I like a brush or not has a lot to do with how much the pressure affects it and how hard I have to press to get the line weight variation that I personally like. In Clip Studio, all this involves is going to the brush size thing at the top and then clicking on the 2 arrows next to the brush size slider and just messing with that graph until it feels good to draw with. That's really the only way to test it, is to do a bunch of different lines, squiggly lines, hatching, trying to draw a little something, and trying it at different sizes as well. And as you can see at the bigger sizes, you can actually start to see that textured sort of look. That's when I know it's just about right. This is the pen that I wanted to imitate a real pen. I'm calling it the Magpie ink pen. And now I wanted to move on to the next one. Now this one's gonna be really fast and easy. It's basically using the same setting, so I duplicated my Magpie. And then I changed the anti-aliasing to be like the pixelated kind. You know, basically this just makes it look crunchy. I don't know how else to describe it. Sometimes I really like inking with this type of pixelated pen, and I don't see these that often. They're not that popular, but for me, I really enjoy them. It just makes them look incredibly sharp. I also increased the randomness slider a little bit so that the line looks even choppier, and I played around with it a lot. It ended up being quite aggressive and quite like pixelated, but yeah, that was kind of what I was going for. So I really like how it turned out. It's quite scratchy if you like that kind of look. Now the next brush was a little trickier. I actually, when I made the duplicate, I changed the tool icon because I want this to be more of a blender, like painterly thing. I'm calling it the soft serve blender just because I thought that sounded cute. And so I needed to do a new brush tip for this one. I wanted it to be kind of soft, so I went back into my little brush tip 200 by 200 pixel thing, and I just made sort of this blob, and I started cutting little bits out. I was trying to picture it almost like, you know, when you dab like a tissue on your painting, or, you know, like a little sponge or something. Like I just wanted it to be sort of like soft and irregular, like edge kind of look. And the way I did that is, yeah, I just like carved out little erased sections, and then I just like smeared it around with the basic blur tool that Clip Studio comes with. And then I saved it just the same way, switched out the tip. I unfortunately forgot to tag it and lost it forever amongst all these brushes, so I had to resave it again. Don't forget to tag, because oh my god, there's so many brushes and assets and stuff in Clip Studio. It's absolutely mandatory. But anyway, I got that figured out. And then this was a bit of a different process because, again, this is supposed to be a blender. So I had to put this like big blob of red so that I could see how it's affecting the other colors. So I'm going to use blue on the brush and red to sort of mess with it. Now, for a blender, you're going to want to go into the like color mixing kind of section, which is under ink. As you can see here, and I just kept playing with it. Opacity was not the right thing to mess with, but like playing around with the different types of color mixing, like the amount of paint, the density, and the color stretch, it was really fun and interesting to see how these worked. I ended up having to look at the way that the blur and like blending tools that Clip Studio came with work, because at first I could not understand how to actually make it blend properly, but by the end of it I feel like it looks really cool. I almost tried to do some like scattering. I played around with the watercolor edge, which basically just makes the edge darker. Very cool effect, but not what I was going for at all. And I ended up just making it so that there's barely any paint in this brush, so it's mainly for blending. And I get a lot of questions about the blenders that I use, so I wanted to make one of my own, and this one I think will work quite well. It's great if you like to slap down blushes and you know, stuff like that on the skin, and then you just want to go in with a tool like this and make all those like sloppy little plops of color into something that looks sort of like nicely rendered. I'm a huge fan of that method. I've been doing that since I was like 14 and first learning how to do digital painting, and I've never gone back. I've been chasing the glory of the Sai water brush, and I feel like this is sort of similar to that. For my next brush, I wanted to make something that was more pencil-y, and I had a fun idea to do like this cloven hoof sort of shape. There was really no like reasonable explanation for why I wanted to do that. I honestly just wanted it to have some cool edges and to look cool when you are selecting it. So yeah, I thought I'd just try it out. I even put some like weird little lines and stuff in there so it would look more like graphite. It's so small and so delicate that you can't really see it, but I do think that that little like cloven shape actually does give it sort of a more pencil-y look for some reason. For the first time, I also actually added a texture, and I just used one of the ones that Clip Studio comes with. They come with a lot that look really good, like canvas and paper textures, and this will make it look a lot more like a pencil. And then in order to make it look more pencil-like, one of the key things to do is to make the opacity be determined by pen pressure, because obviously when you're using a pencil in real life, it's a lot lighter and more gray when you're not pressing down very hard, and then when you're pressing down really hard it gets quite dark. So that's just an easy way to make an inking digital brush look more like a pencil digital brush. And then to make it look more real and more like an actual pencil, I sort of played around with the randomness slider, which makes it look, again, like chunkier. This is something I did on the pixel brush to make it look more pixelated, but here it actually just makes it look more like powdery graphite. I had to try out actually drawing with it, and this is how I knew that it was actually turning out really well, because it felt like I was using a like good quality pencil, one that gets quite dark, but one that you can also, you know, like really gradiate with and make it a lot like lighter if you want, and do hatching and that kind of stuff. It's just like, you want your pencil brushes to be really fun to draw with. It's like very important that it feels effortless. For the final brush I wanted to make before we test this whole brush pack out, I wanted to do a hatching brush. This is actually the thing that first got me interested in making my own brushes, because hatching takes a lot of time and it's a lot of repetitive stress on yourself when you do a lot of it. So I wanted to make this type of brush that sort of like stamps these little lines of hatching out, and this was by far the trickiest one, because I couldn't figure out how to make it not just like sort of look too dark and sort of repeating on itself. I had to make the gaps really big. And the key thing for me was making sure that it actually had some level of randomness, where the brush could sort of double up on itself and go different directions, because otherwise it doesn't look like a hatching brush. It kind of just looks like a fur brush, or like, you know, like line screen tone, which is not what I wanted. So I had to change it so that the direction or the angle of the brush changes depending on the like direction that you're moving your line. And then I had to like really focus on trying to figure out how to tile these appropriately so that it just doesn't become a black blob of fuzziness the second you know, put your pen down. So in the end, it ended up being sort of scattered. There was a lot of effects in the like spraying effect area that I had to adjust so that it worked more the way I wanted to, but it finally got to where I liked it, and now it should be relatively usable. It's still not exactly the way that I want it to be, so if you end up using this brush and you find it a little hard to work with, I apologize for that. I'm still learning. So now that we have my new little brush pack, I'm going to do an entire illustration only using my new brushes to see if they're actually like any good. So I just wanted to draw a quick illustration of one of my characters, and I started off with the pencil brush, of course. I decided to do it in a dark blue color because in real life I like sketching with dark blue or dark red, and I found it actually looked really like cool and satisfying the way that the pencil sort of doubles up on itself. I have it in sort of like a multiply kind of look, so it looks more like when you build up a colored pencil or something, and I found it quite easy to use. It was a little bit, I think if I was to like make it again, I would just adjust it ever so slightly so that it's more it can get like thinner, I guess. But generally I really liked it. Like, I wanted to sharpen it just ever so slightly. Once I was done with the sketch, it was time to try out my two inking brushes. Now, this was a little tricky because, you know, there's two of them, so I had to figure out which one I actually wanted to use. I ended up using my Crunchy Pixels one, which is a little trickier to use, but is more my style. Like, I just really like brushes like that. I will say, when compared to my smoother brush, it looks way too jagged, but yeah, I might adjust it ever so slightly to be less random. I think it's the randomness effect that's making it look so sharp, but it's also just comparing it to the smoother brush that I started out with, and it starts to look less crazy and filthy once I had more of the line art done specifically just with that brush. But I love how it looks, especially on like blush or like hand done hatching kind of areas. I just think it looks so good and so sharp, and luckily Clip Studio is so good at doing like fill bucket around stuff like that. In other programs, jagged line art like that can really make the fill bucket tool like just completely not know what to do, but luckily I don't have to worry about that. This sounds like an ad for Clip Studio. I swear they're not sponsoring this. But yeah. Anyway, so I inked the whole rest of him with this Crunchy Pixels brush, and I decided to use the Magpie ink pen that I started out with for the like color fill. you know, when the fill tool needs a little extra help, and also just, yeah, anywhere that I wanted to color myself. And I found that it worked really well for that. Yeah, as you can see, this is a highly textured pen. It really makes the drawing look more, I feel like it makes it look more hand-drawn and more like it's actually on paper, even on this like super bright, super harsh white canvas that most digital programs start out with. It just looks like it was scanned in or something. So I did my usual thing where I put a whole mask, and then I decided to put some of the hatching behind him. I thought that looked kind of cool, and as you can see, I mean, I filled that in so quickly, but it looks like it took a long time. So I really love hatching brushes for that reason. I highly recommend them. It doesn't have to be mine, but like having this type of brush can really save you a lot of time and make your drawings look way more detailed than they actually are. And we're all about that efficiency here on the LavenderTowne channel. And then once I started like flatting everything in with the Magpie brush, that worked perfectly fine. It's a relatively normal brush, so there's not like crazy textures messing up your filling, which is good. And then I wanted to, of course, use the soft serve blender to blend out all these little areas like on his nose and cheeks and ears and fingertips. And anywhere I wanted the shading to be softer. I actually like generally made the whole illustration much more like softly shaded. I probably wouldn't actually pair this blender with the Crunchy Pixels brush. Like typically if your line art's going to be this aggressive, you don't want a super smooth coloring like underneath it. You want it to be like more consistent throughout, but I mean, yeah. Anyway, and then I use the Crunchy Pixels brush again for the highlights. And yeah, so this is a drawing I did entirely with my little brush pack. This was my first ever time trying to make my own brushes, and I found it pretty fun. I hope that it was helpful to you guys, and I hope that you enjoy my brush pack, even though it is, you know, it's my first one, so there's probably going to be problems with it, but there should be a link in the description where you can download it for free if you like. And if you want to make your own, there's a tutorial that I used whenever I was getting confused, and I highly recommend, by Sunako. Check out her video if you want a more clear and in-depth tutorial. And thank you again to Honkai Impact 3rd for sponsoring the channel and the video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you to my wonderful patrons, including CZ Art, Finn Must Die, Frankie Valerie, Solar System, Live, Naomi, Salty Jackrabbit, Fukuroko, Noose Milk, Raven's Crow, Zocelot, Teho Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Gender Was Stolen, it's Jamal, Kay, Moo Milk, Kadaria, Deadly Nightshade Art, Astral Fox Art, Lily Allure, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Michael Lavalley, Cutie Pie, Ruin Raincrow, Rainwater Pearls, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.